You know, sometimes I think the older I get, the easier it becomes for December to pull me backward through time. It doesn't take much. A certain Christmas song on the radio, the smell of cinnamon rolls cooling on a counter, the creak of a wooden floor in a store decorated for the season, and suddenly, without warning, I'm not an old man sitting in my living room. I'm a boy again. Back in the 1960s, back in those early years when Christmas wasn't something you bought online. You walked into it. You stepped into it. And every year, it felt like entering a brand new magical world. My mother, my sister, and I had a tradition. I didn't realize it was a tradition at the time. Kids rarely do. But looking back, it was as sacred as lighting the tree or baking cookies. Every year, sometime in the first week of December, my mother would look out the window, see the snow drifting sideways over the yard, and decide it was the day. The day we were going into town to do our Christmas shopping. And once she said it, that was it. The whole house changed. The air itself felt different. My sister and I would scramble to put on our thick wool coats and boots that always seemed to take too long to lace. My mother wore her good winter coat, the one with the wide collar and the buttons that looked like little black marbles. She knotted her scarf the same way every year, tying it with a firm tug while checking that we were bundled enough for the cold. Stepping outside was like stepping into a snow globe someone had just shaken. Everything glittered, everything glowed, and my mother, calm, steady, purposeful, would take us by the hands and lead us down the walkway toward the bus stop. That walk alone could have been a story. The crunch of snow under our feet, the sight of neighbors' houses slowly becoming decorated with strings of glowing bulbs, wreaths on doors, candles in windows. The whole neighborhood felt like it was tilting gently toward the holiday, like a record slow spinning on a turntable, easing into song. But the real magic began when the bus pulled into town and the stores came into view. Because Christmas in 1960s, America didn't happen in your living room. It happened in the stores, the five and dimes, the department stores, the hardware shops, the grocery aisles. Each one had a personality, a smell, a sound, and each one contributed a different kind of magic. Let's start with the place that was always our first stop, Woolworth's. The moment you pushed open Woolworth's doors, a wave of warm air hit your face, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of popcorn popping in the lunch counter, wax candles lined up on shelves, and that completely unique smell of tinsel, old-fashioned tinsel, made of thin aluminum strips that clung to your gloves and hair. Woolworth's wasn't just decorated for Christmas. Woolworth's became Christmas. From the ceiling to the floor, the store shimmered. Rows of ornaments hung like candy-colored rain. Santa figurines, snow globes, felt stockings, clothespin angels, advent calendars, card displays. Woolworth's had everything you didn't know you needed until you saw it. My sister and I would drift immediately toward the toy section, of course. That's where all the noise was. The excited whispers of children, the crackling sound of cellophane wrapping, the squeak of carts pushed by mothers on missions. Lionel train sets with real smoke pellets sat on display tables, looping endlessly on small tracks. There were metal trucks heavy enough to survive being thrown down 3 flights of stairs. There were dolls with eyes that blinked when you tilted them backward. There were puzzles, board games, coloring books, and those little cap pistols every kid seemed to want, but very few parents liked. But as much as my sister and I adored the toy aisles, Woolworth's held something much deeper for my mother. To her, it was the store where she could make Christmas happen even when money was tight. Woolworth's was affordable, thoughtful, comforting. She could buy a spool of ribbon, a small box of chocolates, a new dish towel, a pack of Christmas cards, and maybe a new hairbrush for herself, all without spending more than a few dollars. And God, how she stretched those few dollars. I didn't appreciate it then. Children rarely understand the math their parents performed silently behind the scenes. But now I know exactly how hard she worked to make those trips feel magical. From Woolworth's, we would walk a few blocks past the post office, whose windows always displayed oversized red bows and cardboard snowmen, and head toward the giant of all holiday stores, Sears. There was nothing subtle about Sears at Christmas time. The building itself seemed to lean forward as if trying to welcome everyone inside. Big windows showed mannequins wearing plaid winter coats and children's outfits with matching hats. And right inside the entrance, towering over everything else, stood the most magnificent Christmas tree in town. The lights on that tree were large, glass bulbs, red, green, yellow, blue, that grew warm to the touch. They hummed softly, a sound I haven't heard since. Under the tree were wrapped packages, not for sale, not real, but enough to make every child think maybe, just maybe, magic could spill right off the display and into their hands. My mother treated Sears differently. We acted differently. There was a certain reverence to being inside. Sears had escalators, actual moving stairs, and I remember my heart pounding every time we stepped on one. Going up felt like rising through a world of endless possibilities. The toy section at Sears was something else entirely. It was bigger, brighter, fuller. Sears had the toys Woolworth's didn't, the ones you circled in the Christmas catalog for months in advance. The catalog itself, thick as a phone book, sat open on every counter. Children stood over it like scholars studying ancient scripture. My sister would wander toward the rows of dolls, staring at them with a mixture of longing and pure admiration. Dolls with changeable outfits, dolls that cried, dolls that talked, dolls packaged in boxes with windows so you could examine every detail. My mother always paid close attention to prices at Sears, not because she couldn't afford anything, but because she had to choose carefully. Sears wasn't where you bought many gifts. Sears was where you bought one gift, the main one, the dream present. Meanwhile, I wandered toward the department where the real treasures were kept. The sports gear, the bikes, the chemistry sets, the model train kits. Sears had train layouts big enough to make every kid press their face against the glass. Trains with glowing headlights. Trains with tiny smoking chimneys. Trains that clicked and clacked and made you feel like you were watching the future unfold right there on a wooden table. But what I didn't know back then was that Sears held a special meaning for my mother, too. Sears was the store her parents took her to when she was small. It was where her mother bought fabric to sew dresses. It was where her father bought tools he used until the handles wore down smooth. Standing in Sears, she wasn't just shopping, she was remembering. After Sears, our path always curved toward Ben Franklin. Now, if Woolworth was magical and Sears was awe-inspiring, Ben Franklin was something more tender, something more personal. Ben Franklin smelled like cinnamon broomsticks and yarn. The aisles were narrower, the lighting softer. Bolts of fabric rested against each other like old friends. Buttons were neatly sorted into tiny cardboard boxes. And the craft supplies, glitter, glue, felt squares, embroidery floss, looked like the raw materials for childhood dreams. My mother adored Ben Franklin because it held the things she used to make gifts. She never said this out loud, but she believed handmade gifts carried more meaning. Maybe because they took time. Maybe because they took effort. Maybe because she didn't always have enough money to buy the store-bought things she wished she could. But looking back now, the gifts she made were better than anything any child found under a tree in Sears. She would let me and my sister pick out one small craft item each. We took this decision seriously, far more seriously than any adult might expect. My sister often chose sequins or silky thread. I liked the tiny wooden shapes you could paint, stars, little houses, toy blocks. She never told us what she was making until Christmas morning. It was her secret workshop all year long, hidden in the corners of the house we didn't pay attention to. After Ben Franklin, we walked toward Kresge's, the old 5 and dime that was later overshadowed by larger chain stores. Kresge's had wooden floors that squeaked under your boots and a scent that mixed peppermint, cardboard, fresh-baked cookies, and something faintly metallic, like coins. It felt lived in, familiar, honest. Kresge's Christmas section was like a treasure hunt. Some things were beautiful. Some were tacky. Some were obviously made to survive exactly one holiday season. But my sister and I didn't care. We would rummage through bins of holiday trinkets, snow globes that leaked, ornaments shaped like angels with one wing slightly shorter than the other, little plastic Santas whose paint rubbed off too easily. But each item had character. Each one seemed to belong to a story, even before it ever made it to your house. And Kresge's prices, my mother loved those most of all. Even when things were tightest, she could buy a few little gifts there and still have money left to pick up bakery treats for us. But the store that surprised me every year, the one I never expected to enjoy, was the hardware store. You wouldn't think a hardware store had anything to do with Christmas, but in the 1960s, they absolutely did. Hardware stores stocked big strings of outdoor lights, replacement bulbs in the glass jars, fresh pine wreaths, aluminum tree stands, and the kind of sturdy toys built to survive generations, like metal wagons, sleds, and the kind of wooden building blocks that seemed carved from entire forests. The hardware store smelled like pine sap, pipe tobacco, dusty rope, and cold metal. My mother would stop there to buy things like extension cords or fresh fuses for the lights. Sometimes she'd chat with the owner, who always recognized her and asked if we were excited for Christmas. Adults back then seemed to know each other in ways people don't anymore. And then, just when we thought we couldn't walk another step, my mother would guide us toward the best part of the entire trip, the bakery. That bakery was heaven carved into a tiny storefront. Frosted windows, a glowing sign, a bell that chimed softly whenever someone walked inside, and the smell. The smell was enough to make you forget whatever bad thing happened that year. Cinnamon, butter, sugar, nutmeg, coffee, freshly baked bread. The baker always waved at us. He'd reach beneath the counter and pull out 2 gingerbread men. He did it every single year, and every single year he acted like it was a brand new idea. 2 little helpers deserve a treat, he'd say. My sister and I believed him with the full sincerity only children have. We almost always left the bakery with a small paper bag containing something like a loaf of holiday bread or a few cookies. My mother carried it carefully like she was protecting gold. Then came the bus ride home, and if the day had been magical, the bus ride home was the soft landing back into real life. The windows fogged over, our packages rested in our laps. My sister leaned against my mother, half asleep, and I stared at the blurred streetlights outside, watching them streak across the glass like falling stars. It didn't matter if we bought many things or just a few. The real treasure was the day itself. The talking, the walking, the warmth of mittens, the smell of pine on the air, the feeling of being together. Christmas wasn't a destination, it was a journey, and we walked every step of it as a family. The thing about those Christmas shopping trips is that they never ended when we stepped off the bus. If anything, the best part sometimes happened after we walked back through our front door, stomping snow off our boots and tracking slushy footprints across the mat. The house always felt warmer on those evenings, not because the thermostat was higher, but because the day had filled us with something glowing and quiet, something that clung to us all the way home. My mother would set the bakery bag on the counter like it contained something sacred. My sister and I would peel off layers of winter clothing one by one, scarves unraveling, mittens tossed onto the heater vent to dry, boots thudding against the floor. That heater vent, the metal grate under the window, hissed softly as warm air rose. My sister liked to sit beside it and let the heat blow into her sleeves until she said her arms felt toasty as bread. My mother would start putting away the things she'd bought, some out in the open, some hidden quickly in drawers before we could see. I used to pretend I didn't notice, but even then I understood the choreography of Christmas secrets. While she did that, I often found myself drifting to the living room window. From there, I could see the street lamp on our corner glowing in the snow, making each flake look like it carried its own little spark of light. Cars rolled slowly by, their headlights casting long golden beams across the road. You could always tell which families had gone out shopping just like we had, because the back seats of their cars were piled high with bags and boxes. Those nights, everything felt connected, like every family in our town was part of one big, quiet celebration happening in the cold. But what I remember even more vividly than the evenings at home were the moments inside the stores we didn't visit as often, the smaller ones, the ones that didn't always make the big Christmas catalogs, but still had a heartbeat of their own. Take Grant's, for example. W.T. Grant wasn't as famous as Sears or Woolworth's, but my mother loved it for one specific reason. They had the best holiday linens. Tablecloths with red stitching, napkins decorated with embroidered holly leaves, dish towels with cheerful little snowmen. My mother would touch the fabric gently with her fingertips, rubbing it between her thumb and forefinger like she could feel the quality just by brushing it. She never rushed in Grant's. She walked slowly, reading every tag, testing every fold, and the store had this unmistakable smell, something like warm cotton mixed with the aroma of the little grill near the front. They made grilled cheese sandwiches that were legendary among the neighborhood kids. While my mother examined linens, my sister and I drifted toward the aisle with holiday stationery, notebooks, pencils with red erasers, Christmas-themed memo pads. My sister loved writing little notes, tiny folded letters she would slip under my door when she wanted to apologize or accuse or ask something she didn't feel like saying out loud. She'd press her nose close to the notebooks, inhale the scent of fresh paper, and smile like she'd discovered treasure. And then there was the music store. Back in the 1960s, music stores were temples, Wooden bins filled with vinyl albums, glass counters displaying harmonicas, tambourines, strings for guitars, posters of Elvis, the Supremes, Nat King Cole, and Andy Williams hung near the register. But at Christmas time? At Christmas time, the music store transformed. Speakers crackled softly with holiday songs. The sound wasn't crisp like digital audio today. It had a warmth, a slight fuzziness, like the music itself was wrapped in a knitted sweater. My mother wasn't a collector of records, but she always bought one Christmas album each year. Something she felt would shape the season for us. One year, it was Nat King Cole. Another year, it was Johnny Mathis. One year, she spent nearly 20 minutes deciding between Bing Crosby and Perry Como, before finally choosing Bing. And that became the soundtrack of our December. Then there was the drugstore. Not the sleek, fluorescent drugstores of today, but the kind with creaky wooden floors, narrow aisles, and a soda fountain at the front. A place where the pharmacist knew everyone by name. The drugstore was where we bought the practical things: tape, wrapping paper, gift tags, boxes of cards. But the drugstore also held tiny wonders. There were boxes of chocolate-covered cherries my mother loved. There were perfume sets in shiny gold packaging, the kind of sweet, powdery scent that lingered on scarves and gloves for weeks. My sister adored the Christmas candy section: ribbon candy, candy buttons, marshmallow Santas, and those little striped canes that always broke in half before you even got them home. Sometimes the drugstore had a small table with a single train set running around it, the kind of display meant to keep kids occupied while parents talked with the pharmacist. I could have watched that train for hours. Something about the way it clicked along the track felt hypnotic, like watching time circle around itself. And then, of course, there was the variety store that sat at the far edge of downtown, Murphy's. Murphy's wasn't bright. It wasn't fancy. But Murphy's had the best grab bags. You paid something like 25 cents, reached into a big cardboard box, and pulled out a paper sack stapled shut. The store clerk always said the same thing in a cheerful voice: "Might be junk, might be treasure." Looking back now, it was almost always junk. But as a child, it felt like priceless treasure: little puzzles, plastic rings, tiny notebooks, rubber stamps, stickers, chalk, miniature animals. Cheap things, yes, but each one with the potential to become part of some story we invented later at home. My mother would let me choose one grab bag for patience, she said. I wasn't always patient, but she said it anyway, maybe because she wanted me to try. By the time we finished the rounds of all the stores, our arms were aching from carrying bags. My mother always apologized for making us walk so much, but I don't remember it feeling like a burden. It felt like we were collecting pieces of Christmas one store at a time. On one of those trips, I must have been 7 or 8. Snow started falling thicker and faster throughout the afternoon. By the time we stepped out of Murphy's, the street was barely visible. Flakes whirled wildly around the lamppost, and the entire town felt muffled, like sound itself had gone soft. My mother tucked her scarf tighter around her neck and took our hands. "Stay close," she said. The wind pressed against us like a wall. Cars crawled along slowly, with headlights glowing hazily through the snow. We passed a man struggling to carry a Christmas tree through the storm. My sister waved at him. He laughed and wished us a Merry Christmas, his voice carried away by the wind. That walk back to the bus stop left a mark on me. It wasn't frightening. It was beautiful. The world shrank to the three of us and the sound of crunching snow under our boots. My mother's grip was warm and firm. My sister leaned against me for balance. I felt something then, something powerful, the absolute certainty that I was safe, that everything important in the world was right there in that moment. When we finally got home, soaked and cold, my mother lit the small table lamp in the living room, and the warm glow filled the space like honey. She set our wet mittens on the heater vent. Steam rose from them. She sliced the bakery bread and toasted it under the broiler, spreading melted butter on top. We sat at the kitchen table with plates in front of us, steam fogging our faces, and then we wrapped presents. Wrapping presents in the 1960s wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about aesthetics or pleasing an audience online. It was about care. My mother reused boxes, ironed old ribbons to make them look new, saved buttons and fabric scraps for decoration. Each gift was wrapped the way a story is written, slowly, thoughtfully, with little details that meant more than the paper ever revealed. Some of the gifts were for us. Some were for neighbors, teachers, friends from church, people who had helped us throughout the year. My mother believed deeply in giving, quietly, without spectacle. While she wrapped, she would hum along to the Christmas album she'd bought at the music store. The crackling softness of the record made the room feel even warmer. "Don't peek," she'd always say with a serious face, though she never had to worry. We had enough sense to let the magic unfold naturally, and as she wrapped, she'd tell us stories. Stories of the Christmases from her own childhood, stories about her father waiting in line outside a hardware store to buy a sled before they sold out. Stories about her mother baking fruit cakes wrapped in wax paper and tied with ribbon. Stories about neighbors who exchanged jars of homemade preserves as gifts. Her stories stitched time together. They connected her childhood to ours, her memories to our experiences. And I realize now that those stories taught us what Christmas really meant in our family. It wasn't the gifts. It wasn't the stores. It wasn't the catalogs or the decorations. It was the togetherness. Even now, decades later, when I walk through a modern store at Christmas time, bright LED lights, plastic everything, endless beeping scanners, I can't help feeling a tug of longing for that slower, warmer, more human world. A world where you held your mother's hand while crossing a snowy street. A world where a small-town bakery felt like heaven. A world where a hardware store could be magical. A world where Christmas wasn't delivered, it was discovered. Those shopping trips weren't errands. They were rituals. They were threads that stitched our family together. And even now, at my age, I find myself recreating little pieces of that world, buying a single holiday album on vinyl, lighting a small lamp instead of turning on all the overhead lights, walking through the snow just to feel it crunch under my boots. Because the truth is, the magic of Christmas didn't stay in the 1960s. It lived in the people who carried it forward. People like my mother, people like my sister, people like me, people like you. And every December, if we slow down long enough, if we choose meaning over rush, if we choose presence over performance, the magic returns. It waits patiently, just like it always did, in the places we loved and the moments we shared. Thank you for walking with me through those memories. And if you're new here on the channel, well, stick around, subscribe, join us, because there's so much more to this old America than stories. There's a heartbeat, there's a warmth, And there's a kind of magic I think we all need a little more of these days. Merry Christmas, and thank you for listening.